welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about witnessing the wounds that we have in ourselves, and especially this is important when we get to a plateau in our spiritual awakening or ascension. That's when the time comes for us to start to dig deep and figuring out why, like what is beneath the surface of what we think we have a hold on, because there's always more that we can dig into. So if you're interested in this subject, continue to watch. This week we're going to explore kind of like why I was drawn to go to an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica and why it's important for me, and hopefully you resonate with this, to witness the wounds that we each have. Because what I'm realizing is that when we hit a spiritual plateau in our awakening or ascension, those are the times that signs will start to come up that it's time for us to look into the deeper shadows of ourselves. And not necessarily that they're all bad, because I don't think they all are bad, but they're things that we're meant to work through in order to transcend, right? They don't occur just because. There's a reason that they all occur, and there's a reason that we're meant to look at them. So when the energy of the ayahuasca retreat came to me back in January, right away I knew what I was planning to work on. And it's one of my deepest wounds that I haven't actually, I've shared part of it with you guys, and it is centered around being seen. But that trigger of being seen is something that permeates every part of my life. It's not just here on this podcast or on showing myself to you guys. It is literally something that is prevalent in every part of me. So, but how it appears in a deeper way is that it affects my relationship with my partner. And I mean, this is a difficult subject, and the reason that I'm sharing it is because I believe that even if it's a challenging thing to talk about, it's something that will resonate with someone else, which will trigger you to look at your own experiences and your own wounds. So in my relationship with Richard, we've been together for almost 10 years. And it's weird because when we first met, I had this feeling that I know him. I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but I had this feeling that he reminded me of my grandmother on my father's side. And it was in the way that he laughed, and the way his essence just felt like her. And she was still alive at that time, so she hadn't passed. So it wasn't her, but it was like this familial feeling. And, our relationship, I would say, developed fast in the sense that it was like committed from the beginning, although it wasn't like, I love you from the beginning, that took time. But from the beginning, there was this part of me that when we would be intimate with each other, I was afraid, and afraid of really being seen with him. And so there's the thread that I'm weaving together for you guys today. We have, I think, a pretty active sexual life. We have sex probably 2 to 3 times a week, which, I think for our age is fairly good. But I struggle in the way of really being in my body and being a part of the situation. What happens for me is when we're together, I love being close to him and I look forward to it, but then there's something inside of me that almost like disassociates, and I go into my head, and then I'll just start thinking about what other things in my head, so that even though I'm physically with him, I'm not there 100%. And we have struggled with this. It's definitely something that we've talked about and we have tried to work on in therapy. And ultimately what it comes down to is I knew it was a part of me that I'm checking out of. And I want to say that in my past dating life, remember, Richard is my first real long-term relationship. So in my past dating life, I never had this problem because the people that I was sleeping with, it was never this deep of a connection. It was always kind of a surface thing. It felt more physical, and therefore I didn't care if I wasn't seen. Like I felt more protected in the way that the guy doesn't know my soul, so it doesn't really matter how I am and how outward expressing I am in sex. So yeah, I only experienced this with Richard, and I always felt like it's because it's so close. I feel like he knows me in every way, and this is just another layer of exposing me. So I have struggled with memories, like long-term memory, and I have gone through like different sides of this especially it's come up a lot, especially in the last 2 years of my awakening process, because there's a part of me that is like, oh, I don't have past memories. I don't hold grudges. I let things go because I don't remember them. So in a way, I don't have these hurts and pains that are heavy on my heart. And so I don't, I have stuff with my brother that is very close to me, so I'm always working on. But everybody else is kind of like, if we've gotten in a fight, I've let it go by now. I don't think of them. Even my real father and the things that went down with that relationship, I don't carry with me anymore. Now, the positive of that is that, yeah, I don't hold those pains in my heart, and they don't influence me in this present moment. But I started to realize that there is probably some disassociation happening, and that brought up a fear that possibly, am I checking out of my past or my memories because something happened? And of course, when anyone thinks that they don't remember their childhood, things, because something may have happened, that's a scary place to go down. So in this whole awakening process, that fear has been in the back of my mind as the thing, and it's happening. It's like current. It's literally, I'm in the middle of it. So I haven't shared it because I feel like a lot of the things that I share are things that I've gotten to the other side of, so I can explain my journey of the process and how I healed it. But this one is like, I'm in it. I'm like, it's like quicksand that I'm in, and I almost become like this frightened little girl in the middle of it because I don't know how to fix it and I don't know how to heal it. But it's been that wound for me that's always been there, and I knew that through this process of me going deeper into myself, it would eventually need to be healed, right? Because it's the one thing that I have yeah. So that is why I've been called to do an ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, as far as I know, and I try not to research too deeply because I don't want it to influence my experience in the moment when I do eventually go to this retreat and experience it. But from what I understand is it is a time for you to heal the wounds that you have from your childhood, from maybe past lives. It brings up things that you're holding that are holding you back. And so in my idea of booking this retreat is that this was what I was planning to work on. Now, it's funny how energy is, because the moment that you put out the intention and I booked that trip, and then messages started coming in the form of, first was the connection with Kat Fowler and how that podcast appeared in my inbox or in my podcast thing, and I had that reading with her, and that was back in February, at the beginning of February. And through that, you guys know, I found out that I am a recent walk-in, and I'm still processing what that means. But in that reading, one of the things we talked about was releasing the frequencies of the past soul. That there were still lingering guilt and lingering issues of frequencies that soul was still had had that are still lingering in this incarnation. And so I knew, okay, that's probably, and I asked, actually in that reading, I asked, I'm going to do ayahuasca. What are my higher guides asking? What should I put as my intention? And they said heart healing. So I knew, okay, that sounds aligned with what I'm thinking it's going to be. And then last week, and maybe it's 2 weeks ago now, I was on my walk, my morning walk, and I was, again, another podcast came into my feed of, you may like this, and I think it's a new podcast. It's called Ceremony Circle, and it was an interview with called Healing Self-Sabotage with hypnotist Yuri Lee. And the moment that I heard Yuri's voice, I'm like walking on the cliffs, I'm deep into my process of my morning ritual. But the moment that I heard her voice, I knew she was my next signpost, my next sign of help. Now, when I say that, for me, I get the download and I get the intuition of, this is your next person. This is your next step to help you get to this place that you're trying to get. And so literally for me, when I feel that, I stop and I stop everything I'm doing, and I just started searching for her name online. And I found this old email for her, and I just sent her an email and was like, I know I'm supposed to work with you. But then I realized after I sent that email that I was like, this looks like so outdated and probably isn't even her email anymore. So I scrolled down in the podcast, and of course there they had her website. And I'm going to share the information below so you guys can, if this is calling to you, I'll share the podcast that I heard her and also her information. But there was this recognition in her voice, and this is why I think it's all frequency. The moment that her voice came on this interview, it was like coming home to a part of me, which I think those are the signs. Those are the things that resonate. And if, like I've heard people say, when you hear my voice each week, there's something that resonates with you. Like someone has put a review that they feel like they're coming into a crystal shop and they just feel so relaxed. And even though I hate my voice, I think that our voices are a frequency that triggers something in the other. And you will have this reaction of, you don't even know why. You don't know why this person resonates, but it just does. It's like it speaks something deep to you. There's a resonance that's older than your mind could comprehend. So when I heard Yuri's voice, I had this knowing of, I feel safe. And this is the person that's going to help me explore this wound that I've been carrying. So I reached out to her, and I was thinking, I doubt it's probably gonna take months to get an appointment. But to my surprise, she emailed me the next day, and she had an opening like a few days from that day. And so she has an intake form. And as you guys know, I did a past regression hypnosis, so I've been hypnotized once in my life, and so this would have been the second. The first one I did in person, and she works through Zoom. She lives in Sedona. But I've heard from other people that hypnosis can work that way as well. So I just followed the sign of, she's my next help in this process. So, okay, I'm going to do her process. Because, even me, I can do energy healing through Zoom. So, of course, I must be able to be hypnotized through Zoom. So, so her intake form, she has you list out the areas of concern, which for me, I listed confidence, self-esteem, public speaking, and sexual issues. And then the emotional wounds, she has you list out, like she has a whole list of them, and you list out the ones that are the most prominent in your life. And I put as number 1, being seen. And so then we met, and I went into it super open-minded. with all of these things, you kind of have to, because if you go in it with like this preconceived idea of what's going to happen, you're going to be in your mind too much. But I did believe that probably a trauma was going to come up. But the reason that I felt okay with whatever that was is that I felt safe in her voice. I felt safe in her energy. And so I was like in this space of whatever is meant to come out is going to come out. So in the hypnosis, she, regressed me to a past life. And the first one that we worked on was obviously being seen. And she asked me to go back to my first incarnation of where this became an issue and why I had this fear, this deep fear of being seen. So for me, I didn't go right into the life. First, I started just shaking and I was freezing. And there was a blanket nearby, so I grabbed the blanket and she asked, like, what are you seeing? And all I was seeing was like this navy blue, like dark blue around me, and I just felt cold. And she was so calm. And again, like, I can't say enough good things about her technique, because she put me at ease right away. And she said, I know where you are. You just finished the life that we're trying to get into, you just finished. It probably has to do with water. And you're cold because you're freezing from the water. And the blue is what is representing that water. And I was like, I remember the moment that she said it, I felt like, okay, it's acknowledged, so I can release. And in her process, this is what I believe and what I know of my experience with her. She clearly has a gift to be able to facilitate and see with you as you're going through your journey, because she knew how to help me out of the situation that I was in that like being cold and not knowing where I was in the process. So then when she like made me feel safe and where I was, then she said, okay, now we're going to go back into the life that you just left, and we're going to look at what happened there. So as she regressed me further back into that space, hypnosis is such a weird thing, but I always will say, like, it's so crazy that your mind couldn't make it up. So, she says, I want you to look at your feet and tell me what kind of shoes you have on. And the moment that I looked down at my feet, I realized, number one, my skin tone is like this kind of translucent, light bluish color. And my feet are bare and they are webbed feet. And then I'm kind of surprised that that's what, then I look at my hand, and my hand as well had webbing in between it. And then I just felt like, I feel like I'm way taller than normal. I felt really tall. And then I also like I have legs and I have feet, so I'm not like a merman or anything. I'm walking on the beach. Like, I felt I was literally, the scene that I came onto was I was walking up from the water up to a shore. And on the shore there were ruins. And it was like these like mud brick ruins. It wasn't like our current industry cement. It was definitely like a mud brick ruins. And so I'm explaining all of this to her, and she asks, like, where are you? And it was weird, because part of me felt like, am I making this up? Am I pulling this memory from somewhere else? Like, and I told her that. I stopped and I said, I mean, I think I know where I am, but I don't know if if this is coming from my mind or from the experience. And she says, they're all tied together. You wouldn't have this in your mind if it wasn't supposed to be language that you could speak in this experience. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to let go my doubt and just say what I see. So my feeling was that it was the ruins of Atlanta, but in hindsight, I now know that it was the ruins of the Mu civilization. And So she says, okay, what's happening? Who's there? And there was no one there. There were no animals. There were no other beings. No nothing. I did see like trees on the sides of the ruins, but the ruins were empty. And I had this overwhelming feeling of this is so strange. If somebody sees me, then civilization or humans or I don't know how to describe it, like human population will be wiped out, because what I felt is that everything had been destroyed and that I was only able to survive because I'm a aquatic being. I'm able to breathe underwater. And she asked me, well, what happened? How was it destroyed? And this picture that I got was of water, like these huge tidal waves, but coming in on all sides onto this island or this land from every direction at once. And it literally is being buried into water. And of course, everybody dies, but because I'm half, I don't think I'm half aquatic, half human. I'm more human, but I have still some aquatic parts to me. I was able to breathe underwater. And she says, well, who are you afraid that's going to see you? And my feeling was like, God, I don't know, like whoever created this, whoever destroyed everything. And I had this overwhelming feeling that if they know that I survived, they're going to wipe me out and then civilization will be gone as we know it. And it was like such an overwhelming pressure of, like, imagine that pressure on you of, okay, if you're the last one alive and if you're gone, like our civilized race or even back then. So I discovered that the Moose civilization was 800,000 years ago, and that this moment of it going under, which I didn't really know anything about the Moose civilization, but since it's been a few days since this happened, I have looked into it. And what I'm talking about, the catastrophe that happened, they say happened in the year 9,564 BC. And there's a whole history of how we evolved to become the human bodies that we are now. And I was part of that evolution. I wasn't yet fully human. I was part of the ocean as well. And my feeling, like, had this knowing of, I'm it. If I go, there's nothing left on this planet. But then she said, okay, but that's your perspective. And then because I'm in this and feeling this, the moment she said that, it was this trigger of, you're right. That is my perspective. But then she goes, but you know that civilization went on. You know that from this time in space of where we are today, you know that what you thought was going to happen if you die isn't what happened. So your perspective of that terrified feeling of carrying the pressure of, if you're seen, civilization is gone, isn't what happened. And in that moment, I was like putting all the pieces together and almost like a puzzle, and coming to this place of, okay, I can see your logic. I'm tracking. And then it was like, so you can let this go. You can let this fear of being seen, because you're holding the weight of, if you are, civilization will be destroyed. You can let it go because it's not what happened. And I was like, wow, I'm going to say here that kind of what I thought, because a lot of people talk about this, of why people are afraid to be seen, or a lot of people say it's due to like the witch trials, and that they have this fear of being known in their magic or being known in their gifts. And so I kind of thought maybe that was why, but never did I think that I was a aquatic being that survived the Moose civilization destruction. But then she followed the life to the death, and I went back into the ocean, and I did die in the ocean, and I was cold, and I drifted off there. And it's weird because she didn't know that I have this thing about being cold all the time. And she said, this is why you're always cold. And that's why I know she's seeing it from a different perspective. She's not just using my words as what's happening. She's also traveling with me. So, and then she asked me to go to another life where I had this fear of being seen. And I also had said that I feel a little bit like outcast and isolated. So she asked me to do that. And so crazy. So right away, I go into this other body, and the way that I felt this other body was physical right away. I was like, I think I'm really big, like almost like obese, like fat. I'm male. Even when I walk, I'm like shuffling, like I can't even move my weight because it's so big. And then I had this feeling of I'm an ogre. Like I felt like I'm an ogre. Again, why? It was more because of how you can't look at yourself. You're literally looking down at yourself, and you can only take it from that perspective. But it felt like I'm, number one, huge, because I was in a village, and the village like buildings and huts felt like so much like they were for smaller people than me. And then she asked, like, who's there? And I was like, well, nobody's out in the village. They're all hiding from me in their houses. And I know that they're trying to be quiet because they're afraid of me. And she was like, why are they afraid of you? And I said, I think because they think I'm going to hurt them. And she said, have you? And then it was like, I haven't, no. But there's a history of my people that they have hurt them. And so they won't allow me to come into their civilization or their existence, and they don't want me around. And she, she went into, how does that make you feel? Oh, and the other thing is, she said, what date do you think this is? And I was like, I think 1600. And she goes, yes, it's 1648. Like, so I know she's seeing it from another perspective, because she can see what's happening too. And then she said, okay, what are you going to do? That they don't want you here? And I had this like such deep loneliness, because I knew what that meant was that I was going to go back into the forest and live out my life alone. And, I had like such sadness about it, because oh gosh, I hope I don't cry. I had in my heart of that life, I felt so much love, and I wanted to share it. But because of the way that I looked, and because of the past of my people, they didn't want me. And so I went into the forest, and I spent the rest of my life alone. So I think that comes from like, where my self-esteem issues, my feelings of, you can look a certain way, but inside you just feel like you don't belong. I think they come from that life. And even if I was a peaceful ogre, I still was an ogre. I couldn't change the way I looked on the outside, and therefore the people couldn't see me for who I really was. And it's funny, because in this life, I think like externally I look a certain way, and I look like maybe I should be self-confident, but inside I have such deep wounds of feeling like I don't match what I look like on the outside, and that I'm not going to be accepted, and I'm not going to be allowed to be a part of society, or yeah. So then the third one, she asked me to go into a memory in my childhood. And as you guys know, I have no memories of that. The only small memories I have are in the first regression that I did. I think it's like 9 months ago. He had me go through different ages in my life. So I have memories of me explaining those to him. In this this time she asked me to go to age 4, and she's like, "Where are you?" And I was in my bedroom, and I had like such a clear picture of exactly where I was, exactly like where my toys were, how the room was, what I was doing, and it was so clear to me. And she asked, "Is anyone else in the house?" And I said, "I think my brother is here." And then I was like, "But we also live with my mom's friend, and she has a son, and his name is Jeremy." And me in where I'm at today would not have known. I probably vaguely, if someone told me that we had that experience, maybe I would remember, but I would never have remembered the child's name. But in this regression, I was like, his name is Jeremy, and I'm happy that he's here because he and my brother get along well, and because they're together, they don't bother me. They stay in they do their own thing, and they let me do my own thing. And then it was like at that moment that I could see I had a bubble around me. And I was like, "Oh, this is weird." And she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I created a bubble to go around me, so they don't come near me. They don't come around me, and if my mom isn't home." And she said, "Is your mom home?" And I said, "No, she's not here right now." And she goes, "Well, tell me, what is this bubble?" And I was like, "I mean, I don't know. It literally is encompassing all of me, and I just feel like this is how I live. I don't." And it was like a physical bubble, and she was like, "Where does it come from?" And she was kind of, so then I said, "I created it when I was a baby. I created this energy field around myself because what was happening between my parents was too intense for me, and I couldn't handle it. So I created a bubble that I could live in safely." And my history of my real parents being together, I know from, my mom telling me that it was abusive, and she eventually left him. And I was obviously too young to have memories of the actual abuse, but by the time I was 4, we had already left and moved, so we weren't with him. But I had created this bubble from what I felt from the moment that I came out of her, like the bubble was there. And it makes sense because I know I'm so sensitive that I probably wouldn't have been able to survive in that environment if I hadn't done it. But what I did is I literally, as a child, was like creating energy to grow it as I grew. So it just kept getting bigger as I got bigger. And literally, like, it was growing and growing and growing. And then Yuri said, "What if we decide to remove this bubble?" And I felt in my body, I won't be able to breathe. I don't know how to be outside of this. And she was like, "Why?" And I said, I've never been outside of this. This is how I live in this incarnation. This is how I am able to be alive here. So then she did a lot of she had me have conversations with my mom, me as a child, and her as her age at that time. And then she had me go into my mom's body and respond to what I was saying. And what's weird is that when my mom did her hypnosis regression, again, like 9 months ago, she says something, and I didn't remember it until later, but she says that she was protecting me in a cocoon, or I was in a cocoon. And so I feel like she knew that I had created this around me. Yeah. So essentially, I never have allowed anyone to get close to me, closer than that bubble. And like I said, the bubble just kept growing. So at that point, it was like this far outside of my physical body. And then she took Yuri, like we had these, it was like a therapy session of making it smaller. She was like, okay, how do you feel if we just start bringing it in just a little bit, just so that it's touching your body now? And then like we just kept making it smaller and smaller, and then she would stop and ask how I'm feeling. And then it kept getting smaller, and I was like, I'm okay. I can survive so far. And then she said, okay, you're holding the bubble in this. And all of a sudden in my mind, I realized I had just the day before created the post for last week on Instagram and then the thumbnail for YouTube. And in each of them, I'm holding a bubble. And it was like this kind of full circle moment of myself knew that's what I was going to be working on the next day. And then I knew, okay, I can release it. It's time for me to release it. So I did. And, I'm still integrating what that means. And I am still like, first of all, thankful that it wasn't a trauma that happened to me that made me lose my memories or that made me become so afraid to be seen. But also I feel like, okay, the scariest thing that I was imagining isn't what actually was. So of course we can build up, to think of the absolute worst things that could have happened to us as children. And I'm not to say that I'm sure, in some cases, yes, that is what happens. But in this case, it wasn't. I just was traumatized from the moment that I was born and with the abuse that was going on in my house. And I couldn't handle it. And I don't think I would have survived it had I not created that guard around myself. And it's just, it just kept going on. And I never knew that it was there. So I never knew that I needed to let it go in order to be able to feel and be around the people in my life. So it was a lot of crazy, eye-opening moments with Yuri. Again, she was so kind and just so nurturing